Okay, so today we are back with another video. Wow, the exposure on this is pretty bad, but let's try to lighten it down. So we are going to be looking or testing all these heat sinks that we have. So this is the regular heatsink, and that's kind of standard with the BitAxe that you get. Hold on, let's move this here. So you can see that we have the black heatsink, and this is from, I'll leave links to every one of these in the description if you guys want to go and buy one. Let's just change that. Okay, so there we go. This is the black heatsink, and I think that's from Solo Mining Co. That's the UK. And then this one is another heatsink that we got from AliExpress. This is from the BitAxe AliExpress, so we're going to be testing this as well. And we'll obviously test or benchmark this one as well. Let's take it out of the sun. And then we have the copperzilla, and then we have the ice tower. So we did a test with the ice tower, I think it was yesterday, and that was tested against this heatsink that you see here, so the regular one. So this is kind of like my ultimate heatsink test that we have. If there's any suggestions, leave them in the comments for other heatsinks that we can actually add to this list. But currently we have 5 overall. And we're going to be benchmarking each one of them at the default settings, and then probably 675, which is kind of the highest you can go without editing the inspect element on the overclocking. And so that's what we're going to test in today's video. So before we get into it, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, Crypto Miner Bros. Since 2018, CryptoMinerBros.com has been the premier site for top-tier crypto mining hardware, earning the trust of miners across the globe. The prices displayed on their site cover shipping and DDP straight to your doorstep, ensuring no unexpected costs at checkout. They deliver to over 100 countries and even provide lower invoicing options to help you cut down on customs fees. Payment is a breeze with options like direct bank transfer or cryptocurrencies including Bitcoin, USDT, or Ethereum. With over 250 ASIC options, they stock some of the channel's favorites like the BitAxe Touch, and the Avalon Nano 3S. Join tens of thousands of happy customers who rely on CryptoMinerBros.com for dependable hardware fulfillment, clear pricing, and a top-notch service. Check out CryptoMinerBros.com today, link in the description. Okay, so we are first going to need to benchmark the BitAxe with the regular heatsink. As you can see here, it's not actually put through with the spring pins, but we're going to have to benchmark this with the regular heatsink. If we can get it to focus there. And then I think we're going to go up, so we're going to do like a list, I guess. I'm going to start with the other kind of regular heatsink that you get from AliExpress. So that one is going to be kind of, I think, the second worst. And then the black heatsink that we have here, so a little bit thicker, and then the 52 Pi, and then the copperzilla. So this is actually called the ice tower, I believe. So we're going to be testing all of them, benchmarking all of them, and then we're going to compare all of them. So we're looking at V-regulated temperature, or V-regulated temperature. The chip temperature, I think, will include power, fan RPM, and also kind of average hash rate. So we'll have 5 metrics to compare all of these against. I don't think the hash rate is going to change too much because, you know, at the certain frequencies, it doesn't really matter because they're just going to run at the same hash rate. So we might not even have to include that. But the main thing that we're looking at is how efficient these all are up against each other. So in this video, I am going to be kind of replacing this 1 or 5 times basically. I don't think we are going to bother showing that because it would take me ages to record it all and edit it all out. But maybe I'll just do kind of like a quick compilation of us putting on each heatsink and then spinning it up. And then we'll go from there and we'll flick onto the results. So you'll probably see a compilation now of us using each different heatsink, and then it will come down to the results and we'll get into it. So as I said, we're going to do 2 results for regular overclocks, so default, and then one with a higher frequency. So let's get into all of that, and then we'll see the results after all of that. This is just the regular heatsink that we're seeing there, so benchmarking that. And this is the AliExpress heatsink that you can see here. So one thing I want to mention as well, that we're running all the heatsinks that way. So if it has kind of like a trough that goes that way, that runs that way, we're going to perpendicularly put it that way so it fans over the copper heatsinks for the voltage regulator. So let's move on to the next one. And here we have the black heatsink from Solo Mine & Co, I believe. So that's on there. Let's move on to the next one. This is the ice tower cooler that we have here. And I believe that this is going to be bad for the V regulator temperature, but we'll have to see the results after it. So now let's move on to the last one, which is the copperzilla. Lastly, we have the copperzilla here that is running. So now we can move on to all the results of what we have benchmarked for the 2 overclock settings. As you just saw then, we've benchmarked all of the heat sinks that we tried. So we started at the regular one that you normally get with the BitAxe. I know a lot of sellers are actually selling it with Nocta fans and different heat sinks now, but maybe a couple of months ago it was just the regular heat sink, which was the aluminium gold looking one. And then the heatsink from AliExpress, the heatsink from Solo Mine & Co, then the heatsink from Ice Tower, and then lastly the copperzilla. So as I said, all of the heatsinks that could run perpendicular to the V regulator heatsinks were put that way, just to make sure that we had accurate figures. And we have all the figures here. So currently we're leaving the copperzilla on there because after seeing the results from previous videos, I'm going to leave that on there. And then we're also going to be making a video later down the line talking about efficiency. So trying to get the farm to be the most efficient that we possibly can. So that's why we're testing out all the heat sinks. I don't have 2 copperzilla heat sinks, but I would be inclined to order more of them and the ice towers for the other 2 BitAxes that we have. So here are the results that we got overall, and we're going from the regular heatsink, AliExpress, black one, ice tower, and copperzilla, and we have the frequency here and voltage here. Then we have power, chip temperature, VR temperature, and then fan RPM. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to sort these, so create the filter there and then filter this from A to Z. Sorry, I need to add something in here. We'll just put name. So we can filter all of this and then A to Z there. And that should give us the frequencies for everyone. So the lowest frequency and then the higher ones are down here. So we can compare all of them. So regular heatsink, obviously the frequency and voltage, that's kind of explained already. The regular heatsink was on the power draw 17.4. So the highest heatsink that had the highest power draw at this overclock was 17.6, and that was actually the black heatsink. So the regular one and the AliExpress one were doing a little bit better. And then there's a slight incremental drop for the ice tower and the copperzilla that we're seeing here. It's not that much of a drop in power across the board. It's kind of, I would say, average it out to around 17 watts on the power. So that hasn't really changed too much. Then when we go to chip temperature, the highest that we had is 57, and that is on the regular and the AliExpress one. So the AliExpress one is, I'm just assuming, kind of the same thermal capacity as the regular one as well. And then we have kind of a 2-degree drop to the black heatsink, and then the ice tower and copperzilla, you have a bit more of a dramatic drop. So this is 9 degrees drop from here, and this is nearly 10 degrees drop from the copperzilla to the regular heatsink that we see there. So overall, it looks like the ice tower and the copperzilla do fairly outcompete the other 3 there. So those are kind of like benchmarked ones that we could go based on the figures against. And then if we move down to voltage regulator, one thing that kind of sticks out to me is the ice tower. Now, as I said, the reason for that is because the air doesn't actually flow across the V regulator heatsink that we have on the board. So therefore, there's no actual airflow going through that, so it's not going to cool it down. But with the rest of them, you can see even with the copperzilla, that was at 57. So that doesn't have as good airflow across the V regulator. but the other ones that did have kind of channels for the air to flow, those actually perform better for the VR temperatures. And then we come back down to the RPM. So fan RPM, these are all kind of in the same range. Ice Tower and copperzilla have around 1,000 RPM drop, if not 1,500 from the top ones. And that's going to add to the efficiency because you're not pulling as much watts and the longevity, I guess, of the chip as well. So these are definitely standing out, but it looks like even based on the VR temperature, I wouldn't pick the Ice Tower over the copperzilla because of that VR temperature change. That's about 5-degree drop in these two, even though they're kind of priced at the same range. So that's that covered, the regular kind of default frequencies and voltages, and then we'll move down to the highest frequency that you can change it to without inspecting the element. So this is 625. Again, we have a power draw. These are all relatively the same. That's about a 1 watt decrease on the Ice Tower and the copperzilla. Kind of expected, so that's going to add to efficiency. And then the chip temperature as you start to overclock really does bring out a massive difference. So that's a 10-degree drop. The black heatsink actually performed a little bit better than the regular and the AliExpress one. But then the Ice Tower and the copperzilla, those had a chip temperature around 50 degrees. So clearly a lot better than these three up here. And then again, you'll see with the VR temperatures, weirdly enough, the copperzilla is at 63. So on the AXOS, if we look here, it's at 64 right now. And this is just averaged out. But 63, even though it was at 57 down there, but with the Ice Tower, it hasn't really increased that much. So it seems like looking at this, the ones with the flow channels for the V regulators, even up here, are actually better at cooling than these kind of customizable ones, but the chip temperature dramatically drops. So it's kind of a way off between if you want the chip to be cool or if you want the V regulator to be cool. And then the same drop you kind of see with the fan RPM. These are all 5,000 plus, and these are a major drop actually, maybe 1,800 even from the top one. So that's going to add to the efficiency as well because it's nearly 2/3 of what this is. So your watts pulling out from the fan is going to be a lot better. Remember, this was all tested with the same fan, same board, same power supply, just different heatsink. So we tried to eliminate all the variables there. The only one that we can't really eliminate is the amount of thermal paste. That's kind of just up to, you know, how much you actually put on there, how much you clean it and stuff like that. I don't think it's going to make a dramatic drop in terms of if we had perfect thermal paste on the regular heatsink, would that be better than the Ice Tower or the copperzilla? Probably not. So I don't think it matters. You can kind of see these two down the bottom, the Ice Tower and the copperzilla, far superior to these at the top. So overall, if we're going based off a rating, I would say the copperzilla still is probably the best. Ice Tower would be below that. I know people have said we should try the low profile plus, but the 3D printed parts, I still need to find somewhere to buy that. So that might be coming in the future, and we'll just add it onto this list when we do kind of a benchmark of it. So I would say if you want to buy a heatsink, it's kind of a toss-up between these two. The copperzilla will allow you to overclock way further. I believe if you up the frequencies, this starts to drop off, so the Ice Tower does drop off at a certain point. The copperzilla does a lot better, but the voltage regulator doesn't really equal out. The same thing with the Ice Tower, just because it doesn't have those heat channels to flow air through. But these two will definitely allow you to overclock more, but the copperzilla will probably be the best one out of this whole list if you keep overclocking further and further. So that's my recommendation. If you guys have any other ones apart from the low profile plus that you want me to see tested on this list, please let me know. Drop them in the comments. Make sure you like the video and subscribe for more content like this.